Okay, ready to go? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, November 19th, 2024 SFO Airport Community Roundtable Technical Working Group meeting at 3:32 p.m. We are meeting in person at the Foster City Council Chambers Conference Room and virtually via Zoom. Joining us today are staff of the Roundtable, Vanessa Lee, Roundtable Coordinator, Kathleen Wentworth, Roundtable Senior Advisor, Diane Estepona, Administrative Secretary to the Roundtable, Eugene Rindell, HMMH, Technical Consultant to the Roundtable, and with us via Zoom, Jason Studdard, Aerospace Analyst from HMMH. We also have present with us here, Bert Ganong, SFO Aircraft Noise Office Manager. And I'm gonna turn it over to Diane or Kathleen to let us know who else is with us that should be recognized.
We also have Mr. Eric Hamburg on Zoom, and Moy Ferchin on Zoom as well from FAE.
Welcome, everyone. Good to have you with us. Moving on to roll call. Kathleen, would you please proceed with the roll call?
Chair Sam Hendy,
Present?
Member Terry O'Connell,
Present.
Member David Pascal, Member Kaya Aiken,
Present.
and Member Alvarez is expected shortly.
Okay, thank you. And I was informed that Chair Alvarez will be joining us shortly. Thank you very much. Excellent. Before we proceed with the meeting, if you indulge me, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded ancestor homeland of the Ramitash Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the indigenous stewards of this land and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramitash Ohlones have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territories. As guests, I recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. I wish to pay my respects by acknowledging the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Hermitage community, past, present, and future, and by affirming their sovereign rights as First People. Thank you. Moving on to public comments for items that are not on the agenda. This is the time for members of the public who would like to speak on items that are not on the agenda. This is the time to do so. The staff will note written comments which have been received and will allow members of the public to speak on items not on the agenda. Members of the public who are present and have turned in speaker slips will be heard first, followed by members of the public joining remotely. Diane, if you would please explain how the public can participate in today's meeting.
Thank you, Chair. For those attending in person, there are speaker slips on the registration table. Please fill one out and indicate which agenda item you are speaking on or whether you are commenting on items not on the agenda. And you may hand them to me. When your name is called, you will be given 2 minutes to speak. For those attending the meeting on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raise hand feature in order to organize the public comments. During the general public comment period and for each item on the regular agenda, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raise hand feature to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. When you hear your name called, I will prompt you to unmute and you will be given 2 minutes. Please note that the member of the public must wait for the prompt in connection for each agenda item before raising the raised hand function. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Do we have any speaker slips?
We have not received.
How about anyone on Zoom that would like to speak on item not on the agenda?
There are no current hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and close public comments for item not on the agenda, and moving on to our first item on the agenda today is introduction to select nighttime flight procedures and flight tracks. SFO STIK departures and SFO runways 28 left and 28 right approaches. This agenda item covers two different SFO flight procedures. One, a departure, and one, an approach to landing. Flight noise from each procedure impacts our communities during nighttime hours of 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. For the nighttime stick departure, it appears that some of the nighttime flights which are assigned to fly the stick departure, they seem to start out flying the path of the published stick path right after takeoff, but then they seem to make a turn away from the published stick departure, flying down the spine of the peninsula over thousands of residents. The discussion on the approaches to runways 28 left and 28 right are a bit more complex. The decision of which of the existing published approaches to use to land on runway 28 left or 28 right is based on weather, assigned flight procedures, air traffic, and other factors. At night, when traffic decreases, there are more opportunities for flight to fly offset approach path farther away from the peninsula, which potentially could decrease nighttime aircraft noise for residents of the eastern neighborhoods of the city of San Mateo, Redwood Shores, as well as Foster City. Today, we will first hear from Kathleen Wentworth, and she will provide us a review of the two types of procedures we will be discussing. Then HMMH Gene Reindel and Jason Southern on Zoom will present an analysis of the flight data for approaches to 28 left and right. After that, we will hear from Eric Camber, FAA Air Traffic Controller, who will present on these two approaches and answer specific questions that the Roundtable has asked of the FAA. Those questions are in your packet right after Kathleen's presentation. For members of the Roundtable, they are right on the packet. Many thanks to SFO Airport Noise Office Manager Bergenon, who at the request of the Roundtable has provided extensive data to our consultant, Gene Reindel, and who is present here today to answer technical questions throughout the discussion. We will start our discussion today with Roundtable Senior Advisor Kathleen Wentworth. Kathleen.
Thank you. For those of you who were at our last meeting or watched it, we started discussing these two flight procedures. And today, we'd like to go into detail on certain aspects of each of them. But first of all, I'd like to do just a quick recap so that we remember what we learned several months back on this. So we start off with just the review that first of all, we're going to talk about the approaches to runways 28 left and 28 right. And those approaches take place at the end of arrivals into San Francisco area. And as you recall, we have arrivals that have come in from the north. Now it's going to come down the spine of the peninsula, and some of them come over the bay. We have some that come in from the east coast. We have some that come in from the west coast, Honolulu, for example, and some from Southern California and the places south. But all of these approaches wind up merging into streams of traffic coming into San Francisco's airport on runway 28 left and 28 right. And that's during our west flow, which is typical arrival that we have here, 95% of the time. So, Bert, correct me if I'm wrong.
95 to 98, you're good.
So we're going to talk about these landings on runways 28 left and 28 right. This is a showing again. Airport's in the upper left-hand corner. That's the airport, and you can see coming into that, there's two very fine straight lines. One is for 28 left, and one is for 28 right. Then you can see another grouping of airplanes, which these are actual flight tracks. Another grouping that's offset, and this offset path causes far less noise to the residents of our peninsula area, especially those who are in the eastern part of city of San Mateo, Foster City, and Redwood Shores. And so we obviously appreciate those who fly the approaches that are offset farther from the shoreline as they approach the airport. Now, and you can see this line kind of curves back and joins the straight ones because airplanes do need to have a certain distance of straight line forward motion to line up properly with the runway. But this gives us, the offset gives it a little bit of a break to the people along the coastline, the shoreline here. And are desirable. This is a little bit more complex because it's got a lot more lines on it. And these are the actual approaches that are designed on paper and approved by the FAA. And it's hard to see. I'm just gonna bear with me, because not all of your packets are going to have this, but I'm going to go into a closer look on here. And give you a better chance of seeing it. You can see that the two straight lines are coming out of San Francisco here in the upper left-hand corner. And those straight lines continue for quite a ways down here. And those are the straight in approaches. Those are also called ILSs, Instrument Landing System Approaches. It is required to use these approaches under certain conditions, primarily weather related. When it's, we get our low fog around here, or we get restrictions to visibility, low ceilings. This provides the lowest minimum that the airplanes can go to. The airplanes can get below that more effectively, get lower using this system than other systems. However, in other circumstances, it's not so critical to use these straight-in approaches. So there is one, and you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, it describes what they are. That's a nice HMMH illustration here. And the yellow one is the FMS Bridge Visual 2-8 Right. And you can see that offers quite a bit of offset from, from the communities here of San Mateo, Foster City, and Redwood Shores. This yellow line representing the FMS Bridge Visual was commissioned, as I understand it, by United Airlines at some time in the past, and they pioneered this and actually maintained control of it for some time. And I understand that they are now sharing that procedure with other airlines.
They've been sharing it for some time now.
Sometime, thank you.
In fact, I got news for you that late October, they just modified it a little bit. And they took in some of the, I believe the GLS tolerances minimum. They're no longer getting collision avoidance warnings in the aircraft. So fewer go-arounds.
Great. Thank you.
I think Joseph Burt and his team.
And I understand the United is available for other airlines to talk to.
They are, in my understanding, on this new one, United's doing it right now, and Delta's supposed to come on board Thanksgiving or thereabouts. And then the others will follow in December.
Thank you. And then we have the green line here, which, as you see, offers really extraordinary offset from those cities. And that's in RNAV, which is simply a type of satellite with a precise satellite navigation pathway. And then there's a purple line here, and this is a legacy procedure, which is a quiet bridge visual that I'm hoping to ask the FAA if that's in great use or how much use it's in. Bert may be able, when we get to that point, we can check on that. So the idea is to take a look at these offset procedures, see who's flying them, see who's not flying them, and maybe find out why they're not flying if they're not. Now, as we say, there's going to be a lot of good reasons for using these straight-in approaches, so we can't expect them to be used in the offset all the time. But given the circumstances, it's a great thing to do. And this is just a recap of what we just talked about on those colored lines. In addition, we have correct me if I'm wrong, the GLS Tango is an overlay, and do you know if that's still in processing?
The recent change to the FMS bridge may have had the quiet bridge may have had an effect on that.
Okay.
So we'll see if it gets pulled.
At some point, the San Francisco airport has submitted an approach that would be very helpful to using the offsets, using the GBAS, the ground-based landing system. Okay, changing gears. The second concept project we're going to take a look at today is a departure. The first one was an arrival landing aircraft. Now we're talking about a taking off aircraft. And looking at this image on the left simply has no airplanes in the picture. It just has a green swath that indicates the approximate path of a departing airplane that's scheduled to go down towards the south, Southern California. down that way. And this is the pathway that they filed to get down there. Looking at the right-hand picture, you see that there's some activity going on here with the airplanes in the picture. And one of those airplanes is indeed flying right solidly on that nice dotted line, heading somewhere down to Southern Cal. So that's what we expect to see. We expect to see that they're flying somewhere near that green spot. Now, there are times when controllers need to vector these airplanes off of that path for very good reason. There's many very good reasons for vectoring done by air traffic controllers, whether it's for weather, other aircraft, sequencing. There's a number of reasons why they have to vector them, but in the absence of those good reasons, you would expect them to be flying the procedure. So it's come to our attention that, and I'm just going to show you one example of it. This was an airplane that took off around 5:30 in the morning and took off and started to go up on that nice green pathway that we like to see. And then something happened and they turned and flew right down the middle of the peninsula, all the way down in a straight line. And at 5:30 in the morning, that's probably not something we want to see. And so we'd like to find out what kinds of conditions are leading to this. As you can see, there's not really a lot of aircraft going on and it's 5:30 in the morning. So what might be causing, we want to take a look at what might be factors leading to this kind of a pathway. And last thing I want to show you on the STIK is these are the published pathways. And it's hard to see because of the width that needed to be on here. But let me go back just 1 second. When you see this green swath going down, it's going down to something called the port intersection. That's right by Half Moon Bay. And so that's what you're looking for the green path, go to Half Moon Bay, and then at that point, go on your way to whatever is your pathway. And so in this case, we see that there's a pathway to port, and then there's sort of like highways in the sky. Some will take this pathway, some will take this pathway. This one probably goes to Las Vegas, maybe this one goes to Phoenix. They're all going down that way. And so what we don't want to see is that they take off from the STIK and kind of cut the corner to go where they want to go. That's possibly what's going on. We don't really know. That's what we're here to learn about today. And I should say that we submitted some questions to the FAA 45 days ago and asked a lot of questions about these procedures and asked for them for some help on trying to answer them. And I think with that, we can move on to the next. Oh, I should say, with questions so far. Ms. O'Connell? You're good?
So let the record reflect that Roundtable Chair Royce is here with us. Welcome, Mr. Royce. Okay, no questions for Kathleen on her presentation. I'll move on. Jean? Huh?
I'm stopping.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna turn it over to Jean and Jason.
Do you have the presentation? Do you want
Yes.
Jason to do it or?
Oh, does he have it?
You want me to bring it up?
Sure. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason. Okay, can you go to presentation mode? There you go. All right. So, we've done some analysis since the last technical working group meeting and, specifically on 2-8 arrivals. Go to the next slide if you would, Jason. And, what I want to do is, what I always like to start out with, for those of you that have known me a while now, I like to define the problem and then, show benefits that can be had in solving the problem and discuss potential solutions to try to get to, solving the problem. And so Kathleen did a good job of setting the stage, on the 2-8 right arrivals. If you go to the next slide. The problem is that not all aircraft at night and during low arrival traffic volumes are arriving runway 28 right with one of the offset arrival procedures, right? Because when they do that, as you see, Kathleen has shown that it's further offshore, less intrusive to those shoreline communities. So this may cause undue awakenings to residents in the areas of Foster City and other communities near the Bay shoreline, including the eastern portion of San Mateo and the Redwood Shores area of Redwood City. Okay, so that's by my definition of the problem. Next slide. So we looked at arrivals into 28 left and right over a 30-day period in which all runways were open and available for use. And one of the things we looked, and we only looked between 10 PM and 7 AM, and this is a recent 30 days. And so this first one just shows 28 right versus 28 left arrivals. The majority of the nighttime arrivals did actually arrive 28 right, which we like to see, but those 536, which is about, I think, 17 a day on average, still use 28 left. During the nighttime hours, which is 10 PM to 7 AM. If you go to the next slide, you will see a breakout of those arrivals. And you can see the green is what we really want. Those are the 28 right offset arrivals, and these are number of arrivals per each hour between 10 and 7 PM and 7 AM. So you see the majority of the ones that use the 28 left straight in arrivals are those in the 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock hours, so between 10 PM and midnight. But then you had one also on average on the 6 AM, using, again, the 28 left, which we would prefer they use 28 right for all arrivals. But you also see during the 10 o'clock hour and the 11 o'clock hour, you have on the order of 20 to 25 arrivals during those hours. And so maybe you were having simultaneous arrivals on the two runways, or near simultaneous, meaning they were had to use both runways maybe to get the aircraft in. So anyway, again, what we want to see on this is all of the arrivals being in the green banks, if you will, on this chart, which are those that are using an offset arrival to arrive 28 right. And then the ones in blue there are the 28 right straight in arrivals, which is better than the 28 left straight in arrivals. But again, to totally solve this problem, the expectation is that what we want to move is all these to green and understand better, which we don't know at this time, why they may be using 28 left, why they may be not using the offset approach. So that's something that we need to still look into. This is just showing you, again, a month's worth of data and the results to kind of show where we're at currently in terms of the difference between 28 left, 28 right arrivals, and those actually using the offset to 28 right. Next slide. So I'd also want to point out, I talked about potential benefits, and you may recall from the Noise 101 courses that we have provided that sound levels decrease by about 6 dB per doubling the distance. There are additional losses due to atmospheric absorption and things like that, but just a rule of thumb, you reduce noise by 6 dB by doubling the distance. So if you go to the next slide, what this shows is the differences between these arrivals. So if you look at what we're showing here is the reduction in noise from arriving 28 left on the straight in. So the difference between the 28 left arrival and the 28 right arrival, and these are both straight in now, is about 7 decibels, because it is a doubling the distance away from the Foster City noise monitoring site. And so then if you go out to the FMS bridge visual, which is that yellow line there, which is one of the offsets, you can see you're going to get a 17 decibel reduction based off of the delta or the difference between the 28 left straight in and that 28 right offset. And then if you go even further out to the green line, which is the RNAV or RNP Yankee, you get about a 20 dB reduction at Foster City Noise Monitor 12. And so we're getting this is quite significant. The rules of thumb on the perception of noise reduction is 3 dB is on the border of being perceptible. And 6 to 10 dB is half as loud. So we're saying that you can get more than half as loud or even double that reduction by using an offset versus a 2.8 left or 2.8 right. We're already getting about half as loud just going from 2.8 left to 2.8 right, but then much more than that with an offset approach. And we did ask Bert for some actual noise level data for these different procedures. And 2.8, and this is at NMT 12, which is the Foster City Noise Monitoring Terminal. We got on a maximum level, we got about the same level actually for 2 737s arriving 2.8 left and 2.8 right on the straight out. It was about 72 dB for those. But on a sound exposure level, it was actually down about 4 dB. And remember, sound exposure level is the total noise energy because it takes into account not only noise level, but duration. And so it did get a reduction of a few dB, not the 7 dB that the rule of thumb would show, but it did get a reduction. And then also worth noting that anything that was using an offset approach or the few that we looked at didn't actually trigger a noise event at NMT 12. It was too quiet to actually cause a noise event, and I think the threshold at NMT 12 is 62 dB, which means that it was more than 10 dB less than the 72 to not have caused an event. So it is, again, on the order of what this rule of thumb is showing, something around 10 to 20 dB less by going out to those levels, and probably below the level that it would take to awaken residences if you were to use an offset approach. Next slide. And that is it. So I'm willing to take questions too if anything wasn't clear or whatever, but I think what I gained from this is that and from what Kathleen said for both of these procedures is that there's a real benefit to be had here. If we can somehow during the nighttime periods, again between 10 and 7, if we can have maybe a single stream of arrivals in the 2.8 and those be all on an offset approach. I know there are reasons why we can't do that, but I think as a roundtable, that's our goal. And we can see the benefit, there's true benefit from that. The noise levels are going to be much less through the offset approach. And then similarly on the STIK departures, you know, rather than send them right down the center of the population where everybody's at in the middle of the night, if we could somehow keep them on that procedure until the transition. So I think there's great benefit to be had in both of these, and I think the next step in my mind is really having the discussions with the FAA, and they have come prepared to answer some of the questions that we've already posed to them, trying to see how we can get, you know, maybe not 100% what we want, but closer than we are today.
Thank you, Gene. Any questions for Gene?
No, I think his presentation was very clear and concise and gave us a lot of good information.
Yeah, thank you.
I agree. Thank you so much. I have a question. I think I know the answer to it, so it might in a sense, but I'm just gonna ask it anyway, because it popped into my head. So why are we focusing on late night and early morning? If this is a good idea, why aren't we doing it all the time? Middle of the day, morning?
I can answer that, but I don't know if the roundtable also wants to chime in here, but it's really, there's a couple good reasons for focusing on night. One is it's when people are sleeping and the disturbances are gonna be much greater. So if you take off a stick and you go down where all the people are residing and trying to sleep, you have a greater chance of awakening them. And so we're trying to avoid awakening them. Same with the arrivals. If you push them offshore during the night, you won't be waking people up during the times that they're trying to sleep. The second reason is because there is less traffic. So, for instance, vectoring is used a lot, which would take them off of the stick procedure because of other traffic, avoiding other aircraft or things like that, right? So there's less of that occurring at night. And same with the 2.8 arrivals, there are just less arrivals, so you don't probably need a dual stream of arrivals. You can probably get by with a single stream of arrivals.
That's what I thought was the answer, but I just wanted to double check.
No, it's a good question.
Well, Well, thank you for raising the question, because even though no members of the public would be wondering the same thing that you thought in your question, it's a very important question. Thank you for asking it. Jean, thank you for your presentation, and more importantly for me, I think, thank you for the summary and the data that you presented, which really highlights how significant that impact of those offset approaches are used compared to what we have in currently with the ILA, right? And the significance of this is really, and that goes to Kaya's question, during the day, we don't like the noise, the aircraft noise, but it is kind of mixed with everything else around you, unless you're really laser focused on it. You could more or less go on with your day, but at night, being disturbed and awakened in the middle of the night or early morning hours, it's really a health factor, a health problem at this point. And, so we are trying to work with our partners in the FAA and the airlines and SFO to get to a point to where we need to mitigate this, and we are outlining some of those approaches that we, no pun intended, that we could use to do so. And so again, thank you very much. And I mean, look, it's really glaring on the slide that you put the noise level differences. That speaks volume in itself to the impact on our residents in those affected areas. So thank you for doing so. And
So my only comment is, and I think that while the benefits of using the offset approach for arrivals is obvious, and, you know, especially with the data to back it up. But on the, departures, on the STIK departure, is keeping these planes from making too tight of corner and coming back down the center of the peninsula. As one of the communities where we are the pivot point of the turn, is trying to get them to be more consistent, going to infect our community, notably Brisbane and outlying San Francisco communities? Is that gonna put more of an impact on us?
It shouldn't, and that's why we're recommending we look at this, is because we're not going to affect that northern part of that procedure. It's only affecting it where they turn off, and they're turning off and then flying over these, you know, the peninsula cities at that point, rather than continuing out over less populated areas.
So committing, the airlines or the traffic controllers or the FAA to adhering to this procedure is not gonna put any burden on the initial takeoff from this procedure.
Correct. We're not suggesting that more use the same procedure. What we're saying is those that do use that procedure to stay on the procedure until that, transition.
And certainly on another topic for another date, I know that we were looking at going under the gate, you know, going further up and through the gate to
Right.
mitigate even more of the lower or the upper peninsula noise factors.
Right, and we've done some work around that already, and.
And that'll be another
Right. And so
conversation.
Right, well, it's already, and Kathleen, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's already something that has been implemented.
Mhm.
You know, maybe not as fully as we would like, again, between the nighttime hours, but you know, it's been implemented. They are taking that procedure out over the Golden Gate.
Okay.
And so, again, what we don't wanna do is say, take some of those and put them back on STIK. We're not saying that at
No.
all. We're saying those that are still using STIK, because we can't get 100% to go out Golden Gate. For those on the STIK, let's keep them on the STIK.
Okay, great, thank you.
If I may,
sure,
so what you're referring to is the night and then the Oakland hush. We monitor that, we check it regularly. I've met with the Tracon last Friday. And I spoke with Joe Bird and Neufer on Monday. Both of them have said that they've made some internal changes. We should see these diminish at night and possibly even go away. So.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
I'm looking forward to that.
What would go away?
the sticks at night between 1 and 5. And the Cross Peninsula, Oakland, they turn left down the bay and then they go out over the peninsula, the FedEx departures. So knock wood, we'll see those disappear,
Great, thank you for the update.
please.
Well, thank you. If there are no further questions to Mr. Randall, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the FAA and turn it over to Mr. Sandberg. Thank you for joining us, and please go ahead and proceed with your presentation.
Good evening, and thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes, not
All
yet.
right.
Yep, got it now.
Yes, thank you.
All right, excellent. So thanks for bringing me here. I'm hoping I can help clear up some of the conceptions with 2-8 right and 2-8 left arrivals and the stick departures. So back in October, the technical working group submitted a series of questions about the stick departure procedure and arrivals to runway 28 between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. that we have agreed that we're going to call the nighttime operations. So the question is how is traffic routed to runways 28 left and 28 right? Controllers are already directed to direct the aircraft to runway 28 right to the extent that they possibly can. As traffic has increased, the need to use both runways later in the evening and earlier in the morning has increased. I think if we take back a look at some of those slides that we looked at here just a little bit ago, we've got that 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock hour that is still relatively busy. Same with that at times, that 11 to midnight time. When the traffic demands it, they're going to have to use 2 runways. And that's just the nature of the beast. Otherwise, we're going to have significant delays going into San Francisco. So one of the keys is, in order to assign the FMS approach procedure, the pilot has to request the procedure. There's nothing the controllers have in front of them that gives them an awareness of what the qualifications are, either of the aircraft or the flight crew. In order to assign the quiet bridge visual, there are weather requirements that have to be met. And if those requirements aren't met, then we can't assign that. We have to go back to the ILS. So we are experiencing some flight crews saying that they don't want to fly the quiet bridge visual, and they're requesting an ILS or an RNP approach instead. And we do what they ask. Why they refuse that, I don't know, but we have had some examples of that. So the question of the diamond arrivals are typically assigned runway 28 right. But if we have another aircraft that is vectored down the bay, the diamond arrivals can be moved over to the adjacent runway 28 left. So if we've got a tie there, we've got one coming down the bay and one inbound on the diamond, we're going to move that diamond arrival down to 28 left. One other issue, if the weather does not support visual approaches, heavy aircraft on the diamond have to go to the left unless there are absolutely no other aircraft following them. So these graphics show San Francisco arrivals between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., October 10th through October 16th. If you take a look out to the west, down to the south and out to the east, you'll note that there's still some sequencing going on during these hours. During this week, there were 133 arrivals to runway 28 left, with 478 arrivals to runway 28 right. And of those, 166 were on an offset procedure of some kind. So this graphic was intended to basically show the San Francisco arrivals to 28 left, 28 right, overlaid on a satellite map, just so you get an idea of where the aircraft are flying and what they're doing during those hours. So the working group had questions about the STIK, and the questions they were referred to as non-compliant flights. It's really kind of a misnomer. It's not that they're non-compliant, it's that the controller has vectored them off of that procedure and they're no longer on it. The air traffic controller has taken responsibility for routing, and they've removed everything that is on that SID. So right now, there's simply too much traffic in the area to just leave the aircraft on course. Both Oakland and San Francisco have departures that move out in that direction, along with the other arrivals in the area. It's a busy area, and because of the amount of traffic, it's challenging, if not impossible, to not reroute those guys. One thing that we also want to bring forward is that in the Metroplex outreach, we said then that San Francisco and Oakland departures would still have to be vectored even after we implemented these RNAV SIDs. So the graphic on the left shows the STIK departures, while the graphic on the right shows STIK departures in red, San Francisco arrivals in green, and Oakland departures in blue. This was kind of meant to give you an over idea of what is happening in the area at the time, and one of the reasons why leaving aircraft on the STIK just isn't something that we can necessarily accomplish. So this slide, again, this is the San Francisco departures in red, the San Francisco arrivals in green, and the Oakland departures in the light blue. And this was over a satellite map to again give you an idea of what's happening or what happened that week. So the working group asked for, and we are going to provide them a flight plan form at the end of this. And we're also including instructions on how to actually fill that out. It's not necessarily something that is used nowadays. Almost every airline and aircraft, period, for that matter, even private pilots such as myself, they're going to file a flight plan electronically through any one or a number of online services, whether it's SkyVector, Jeppesen, Leidos, Flight Data, ForeFlight. There's an awful lot of available online ways to put in a flight plan, and most people tend to put it through that way. The airlines also use their own software to feed our system through different providers, and that's another method that we get flight plan information for. So question number 2 was, can an airline put in remarks that they want to remain on course? The answer to that is yes, but a controller is still going to route the aircraft based on the traffic and not necessarily on a pilot request. So the first question was, you wanted to know if the airlines can let controllers know that they want to remain on course. Can they communicate the request? And yes, we would suggest verbally, but controllers are still going to be vectored, or controllers are still going to vector the aircraft when they're off of that procedure whenever it's necessary. Question 2, are vectors off of the STIK done by pilot requests or controller initiated? I believe it is done at both. I don't have that information, but again, controllers are going to do, and they have to do, what is necessary to separate traffic in the area. The third question was, do controllers have to grant requests? Our guidance in the 0.65 says that the pilot requests are supposed to generally be approved when traffic, weather, and letters of agreement allow. So if it's something that we normally do and the pilot requests it, if we don't have a reason to say no, we typically don't. So these were 3 questions generally aimed at limiting vectoring off of the STIK. So one of the problems with limiting that is that if we change what we do today, we are in effect going to be moving more aircraft to other communities and concentrating the traffic over those communities. The traffic in the area is just too busy to limit the tools that we have available to controllers. So the ATC system is supposed to provide for the safe, orderly, and expeditious movement of traffic. Limiting what a controller can and can't do is in a manner, a direct conflict with those duties. So here, the first two questions are directed at making airline requests via flight plan for 2-8 right or one of the offset procedures. As of today, flight plans are just not set up for requesting either the runway or a type of procedure, and they have to verbally request a specific approach. Last question on this slide was to see if we could supply a list of airlines that are capable of flying an FMS approach. We just don't have that. The reason being is while an aircraft may be certified to fly an FMS approach, we don't know what the qualifications of the crew are. So we think that question would be better directed at the airlines. So the first question on this slide is similar to the question on the last slide, which airlines are able to fly the RNAV RNP Yankee to runway 28 right? And that answers that we don't have that information because the capability to fly that procedure is contingent on both pilot training and the aircraft qualifications. Questions 2 and 3 is looking for suggestions regarding increasing the offset arrivals. For now, the bottom line is the pilot has to request them. And when the weather allows, we will assign the visual offset procedures or the FMS procedures when requested, as long as the pilot requests it and traffic allows us to assign that procedure. Thank you for your time. I hope this has been helpful and I can take any questions you may or may not have.
Thank you, Mr. Canberg, for your presentation. And I'm going to go ahead and open it to the folks here around the table, starting with the members, and or maybe Jean or Kathleen, or would like to start. Please go ahead.
I think his answers were fairly clear about what the capabilities of the FAA are. I think that for us, a lot of the questions need to be, or the solutions need to be directed towards the airlines. And that's not just talking to the pilots, you know, our departures here. This is talking to the airlines to let the pilots that are leaving from other airports know about our request, because that's when they want to be requesting that. Wouldn't it be when they're getting ready to come into San Francisco, not as they're leaving?
They can do it through dispatch when they file a flight plan. But typically the request is, as Eric mentioned, will come in as they're, say, 200 to 100 miles out, and they're lining them up and they are listening to the traffic. They'll hear what's going on. Most people are getting to a right. Okay, we can ask for it. Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mr. Canberg, you mentioned, from what I gathered from your presentation, a lot of the challenges from your perspective are the traffic,
Yes.
right? So are you talking traffic throughout the nighttime, or are there certain hours to where traffic is impeding the ability to keep those folks on the path? Because is it the same, like say at 11 p.m. and then 2 a.m. or how do you handle those differently?
I think that the hours and how busy we are is something that is fluid. When we have weather that happens during the day and all of those arrivals start to get pushed later and later in the evening, it's not something that we can simply say, okay, at this hour we can or can't do this. It just depends on the traffic at the time and the demand at San Francisco, as I think most people here know, it continues to increase. And with that increase, those busy periods keep turning later and later in the evening, and they're also turning earlier in the morning.
Thank you.
If I can follow up on Mr. Hindy's, earlier in my presentation, I showed one slide that showed one aircraft being vectored off of the stick down the spine of the peninsula. I have another 2 dozen slides showing the same thing, some of which I took the time to listen to the ATC tapes on it. And I was disappointed to see a couple of those tapes reflect conversations which reflected that this was going to be a shortcut for the airplane. And so it's those unnecessary, seemingly unnecessary vectors that I think concern us. I'll be happy to send you the information and you can see it. And I think I sent some of that to Mr. Burt a year ago. I think it was. And so I think, is it possible you could address whether or not shortcuts are being given to aircraft to put them on the transitions off of stick?
I can't talk about the stick, but I can talk about my career. I was up in Seattle for about 30 years. I controlled traffic, and it was done early and often to give aircraft shortcuts. One of the things that my job entailed was the expeditious movement of traffic. And when I gave a shortcut, that was exactly what I was doing. I was trying to be expeditious and trying to help the flying public out to the best of my ability. Throughout the nation, I know that the aircraft are shortcutted daily, if not every minute. There's something that goes on with that. Controllers are trying to do the right thing, and I understand that your experience is a little bit different, and your impact by it is a little bit different. But the controllers themselves are trying to do what they're tasked with.
Thank you for that. I understand completely, having flown how many miles and having appreciated many of the shortcuts I was given over my career. I understand that. But most of those shortcuts were given up to 30,000 feet. And that's the distinction I think we need to make here, is these are being made at 5,000 feet, 6,000 feet, 7,000 feet oversleeping people. And we don't expect you to know that you're putting them over sleeping people. That you don't have a demographic map in front of you. We get that.
Yep.
But we also know that the procedure that was approved for this kind of departure, the stick in this case, was vetted publicly when at the time it was designed. It probably went through whatever environmental NEPA or whatever needed to be done, and that was a respected flight path and a publicly designed, and presumably that's what, why it was designed. And so we're just trying to understand how we can, maybe a better question is, how can we explain to the controllers how this impacts people? And not saying, without, there's probably other procedures other than this one. This is just the one that affects our community somewhat. But how can we explain to the controllers that vectoring or giving somebody a shortcut is going to wake up people at 2 a.m? Is there a way? Is there training? Is there mentoring that takes place that we can have you help them understand that?
Kathleen, I don't honestly have a good answer for that. Controller awareness about noise issues is something that this next generation, I think, is going to have to be more aware of. And I think that that sort of giving them that knowledge is something that is taking place. I just can't tell you that anything's going to happen right now, because it's not something that I'm necessarily privy to. The one thing that I would ask the working group to remember is that if for some reason we do decide that we are going to find a way to leave these stick departures on course, you are going to concentrate the noise over other communities, and those other communities are going to not necessarily enjoy that. So that's something else that, from my perspective, I think also needs to be taken into account.
Well, we can show you the map, but
Well, yeah,
with the geography.
I'll say on a lot of procedures, I would agree, but on the stick procedure, I think it was well designed because it avoided a lot of populated areas. So you're not necessarily, yes, there are people that still live under them, but it's sparsely populated. And so, I think in this case, you really are, whenever you provide a shortcut, you are really taking them off an unpopulated area to a very densely populated area.
Yeah, and I do get that. But the other thing that I also want to make sure that I emphasize at least a little bit is that when the Metroplex was presented, We told everybody then, it's kind of like, even though we're building these RNAV SIDs, we are going to have to take them off of those procedures just as a matter of traffic. And as of right now, that's one of the things that's being done.
No, and I think we get that. It's just, we're trying to figure out a way when it's not necessary by traffic. How can we encourage the airlines and the controllers to not provide these shortcuts? Because Kathleen has several dozens of examples of there was no other traffic in the area. It was clearly a shortcut. She even listened to the tapes and it was clearly a shortcut. How can we encourage the people not to allow those shortcuts in the middle of the night? I mean, it's just, is there a standard operating procedure we can put in place? Is there something that we can say, you know, the STIK is to be adhered to unless traffic doesn't allow it and only traffic doesn't allow it? Or is there something that we can put in there to, I don't know, just encourage this better behavior? Not that it's bad, because they're not doing it intentionally. We don't believe that for a second, but you know, we have defined this problem, I think, pretty well during the night. And is there any way that we can just get better adherence?
And I know you don't want to hear this from me, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I don't have a good answer for you.
No, I
So Eric,
appreciate
let me
that.
jump in.
Okay.
So let me step in. So that's partly why we're here, right? So we're here to have these conversations. We're here to have these discussions. I'm sorry, my name's Joe Burt. I work here in OSG with Eric Tamberg. I don't know that I was officially introduced, but anyways, that's why we have these conversations, right? That's why we have this roundtable. That's why we attend these. We work with you. We work with you guys to try to come up with solutions. Night Hush is a prime example of that, right? So, you know, I think having this communication, having these discussions is the first step, right? And things aren't going to change overnight. As Bert, you know, alluded to earlier, we're still having non-compliance on Night Hush, but we're working it, right? Because you have human in the loop error, right? You have a human involved, there's always going to be error, right? So, you know, that to me, we're already starting that process, right? We're having these discussions. We're briefing the technical working group. We're part of the actual roundtable itself. And so I think that we've already begun those, right? And I think it's just getting the message to the controllers. Not saying it's going to happen overnight, but I think we have already started that. And this is a good way. I mean, if you feel like that you need to do more, then my suggestion would be maybe write a letter to the regional administrator asking, hey, can we put something out to the facility to, you know, when at all possible, leave them on this procedure. You know, there's many different avenues that we can go, but to me, we've already started that, right? We're in this meeting, we're having this discussion. Eric Tamberg has briefed you all on the reasons why we do what we do and when we do them. So I think we've already started that process. So I don't know. I hope that helps. But I think that's probably the place to start, right? We're here today. We're having this discussion. We'll go back to air traffic. We'll brief air traffic. We'll brief the regional administrator. All of these things, right? But again, it's not going to happen overnight, right? So, you know, most of you know we have to train controllers. We have to get the word out. That doesn't just happen overnight. There's different shifts. Controllers are gone. You know, there's a whole bunch of things that go on. So I think that, you know, we're kind of already process. I hope that that helps and clarifies some of that for you all.
Yeah, Joe, I appreciate that. I think it does help. I guess just the fact that you said you're gonna go back, you're gonna brief controllers, you'll brief the regional administrator. When you do that, if there is something that this roundtable can provide to enforce or reinforce what it is we're trying to do that would help move the needle on this, then by all means, reach back out to the roundtable to see, you know, whether, you know, they'd be willing to do something in addition to what we've already done. Because I think that's the piece that can lag on these technical working group meetings, is that we're entrusting that you'll take it back and see if there's things to come back knowing what we're trying to do here, are there ways to move the needle that we can help with as well, not just rely on you to, work with controllers and whatnot, but is there, would something from the SFO roundtable, saying that we really want you to stay on the stick during the night unless there is traffic reasons, would that be helpful to move the needle? I don't know. What is it that would be helpful to move the needle when you have those briefings with the others?
Thank Joe. Joe?
Joe's frozen,
Yeah, now it's off, yeah.
frozen in time.
No, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yes, we're here.
Okay.
yes, we
Yeah,
can hear.
Gene, you're 100% spot on, right? And I think that, if you feel like the roundtable wants to write a letter asking that so that you have something formal, by all means, we
You're breaking up, Joe.
Yeah, Joe, you're breaking up, but I think we got the gist from you saying that if we are compelled to write a letter, we should. So.
And I think if there, yeah, and send stuff to Bert, and Bert can send it our way, and we can look at it. If there's a particular one, we can look at it that way as well.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to do that, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, and apologies for not recognizing you in the beginning. Joe Bird, Team Manager, Western Service Center from the FAA. Joe, thank you for your comments. Over the last few years, I think we have this working relationship between the roundtable and the FAA has progressed to where we could see some results, right? And we understand this collaboration really became something that is good for all of us and more importantly, for the community that we both serve, right? So this is what we're trying to do here, build on that, what we have been able to accomplish in the past and continue on that path to really make a difference. And we appreciate your collaboration. We appreciate you being present. And like you said, okay, this is the first step or this is part of the process. But you probably could understand also our frustration because this is a very lengthy process, not from your perspective not from your side only, it's just the impact in our communities. And we get to continue here and witness how this noise is impacting our folks who are under the plane. And from what I heard from Mr. Tenberg, it seems like almost a standard operating procedure to give shortcuts. But those shortcuts do not come free. They come at the expense of our community. And this is where I think where us are asking, okay, we understand the shortcuts, we understand the weather, and we understand the traffic. Can you understand with us our community that is being impacted with the traffic noise? And this is really what we are trying to see. Yes, we hear your side, we understand it. Can you hear us and can you understand where we're coming from? And we're trying to figure out, to chart this path together so we could get to the end goal.
Understood and absolutely.
Oh, please go ahead.
No, I just said understood and I agree. Sorry, I'm having a bad connection. We got that storm rolling in, so.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Joe. Terry?
So I totally agree with what the chairman's saying here. And what I heard in the questions that were asked and the response that Mr. Tanborg gave was that a request for a shortcut is given depending on the contract with the airline, traffic, weather conditions, and otherwise it's given as a regular occurrence if the pilot requests it. And maybe it's something that we could put or let air traffic controllers know that it's important for that plane to get to 10,000 feet or be at some other height before the shortcut's given. And maybe that would be something that would minimize the effect of a request for a shortcut on the sleeping public. But still allow that leadway for the pilot to make the ask. And, you know, if there's some sort of training that air traffic controllers, when in the position to be able to grant a request, say, sure, call me when you're at 10,000 feet, or call me when you're at 20,000 feet, or whatever that may be that could help minimize the impacts. Just a thought.
It's actually a good thought. In fact, I'll spend some time with Joe talking about it. See if we might be able to generate that into our letter of agreement with the Northern California Tracon. Might be a simple modification they can put into a later iteration of the document.
And certainly if safety is an issue that,
Right,
you
oh
know,
yeah,
trumps everything.
yes, yes,
So
yes,
to
yes.
speak.
Traffic too. I mean,
Traffic, safety,
Right. That's not an ask here, right? Our ask is when it's not needed, not doing it.
Yeah, and we're talking more the shortcuts
Right,
than the vectoring for a reason.
but I will do a little bit of research on it to be sure that
Because what
10K
height,
would be it.
normally when they get to port, what height would those planes be at?
16 and above.
60. Okay,
Gosport, don't have to Gosport, Tim?
I
Below 10?
think we see a lot of them at 16.
Or maybe they're granted.
Perhaps unrestricted, yeah, I don't know. I have to look, be certain.
Right?
Well, this is really just a question. So what I was hearing from all these, again, thank you, excellent presentations, and this is such a good dialogue. What I was hearing from Mr. Tannenberg, or just a general tenor, is, you know, you have the airlines that want to get to, you know, that plane to its destination as fast as possible. And I understand why. So why did the United Airlines do, you know, on its own, create that pathway over the bay if it was counterproductive to them, if their profit is just being fast and getting one plane to the other, noise be damned, then why did they,
the offset
Data
procedure.
can
yeah, the
answer.
offset, why did they pioneer that on their own? They must have had a reason.
Oh, yeah. So it was both air traffic and United. They figured out by keeping the traffic separated laterally, they could actually get better throughput. And so it was very beneficial.
Okay, so they were doing it for a reason having nothing to do with noise.
No,
But-
noise is a side benefit.
Okay, it was a side benefit, okay. And then my other comment is that, I recall at a meeting or other that we were talking about incentivizing by giving prizes or awards to airlines that, didn't, violate noise boundaries. And I don't know if that's part of the solution of publicizing, the FAA publicizing, or some sort of incentivizing,
Well,
so that it isn't just money and get there as fast as you can, but there's another incentive about noise. I don't,
well, incentives typically are done by airports, not the FAA.
okay,
And so, might be reduction in landing fees for a year, something like that, but it's typically for adding a new route, something like that. Now, there is sort of a fine line when we're doing something like that. You have to make sure that everybody has a bite at that apple. You can't exclude. And so that's where it gets sticky.
You can't discriminate.
We can't discriminate.
why would we wanna discriminate? Why is that hard?
Well, no, if you only
Just
give it
leave it
to
to
a
make sure.
percentage of the group, but not the rest, that's considered discrimination.
Like if all, say all, and I'm just gonna throw this out there, say all aircraft can't do an offset. approach.
Oh,
And if all aircraft can't do it, you can't reward those that do.
I see, so type
Because
of plane,
You could
some
discriminate.
some type of plane.
And I don't
might
even know
not
if that's the case.
Well,
I'm just saying if it was,
Yeah.
then you couldn't discriminate because you can't discriminate against those that can't do that procedure.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't want to discriminate, but that's why there's that tightrope walk, if you will, because you could just say everybody do, or whoever does the offset approach is getting an award. Well, what about this person that, because of whatever, they can't do it, right? So that is discriminatory.
mhm,
And then you can't do that.
exactly.
Is that an issue? It might not be an issue. I'm hearing, you don't know if it would be an issue.
I don't know if that particular thing is an issue,
Okay.
but that is something that you would have to look at to make sure, and that's why you brought it up, because you can't discriminate.
Right.
And then on the issue that it's the airports that do it, not the FAA,
Mhm.
but doesn't the FAA oversee everything an airport does? Or no?
Right, and they would be the ones who would come down on us for discrimination.
Okay, okay.
But yeah, so, and you do have a fly quiet program here that does award airlines for
Mhm.
flying. the
And maybe-
procedures.
Making it more robust or exploring that, and maybe it's not possible. It's
But it
just a
could be
thought.
that, yeah, some of these things that we're talking about, maybe it gets into their fly quiet program when they update it or something like that, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't know who brought it up, but whoever mentioned port, so on the procedure, it's at or above 10 at port.
At or above.
Thank you.
So there are no further questions. Any of the presenters would like to start a discussion among the roundtable? Anyone has any further?
On that one, Joe, I'm looking at the chart right now and I think it says cross port at or below 10.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. It is out or below.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring that up. Kathleen was correct, and I know that I would need to look at tracks, but I believe there's been, particularly in the late night hours, they get unrestricted. And so, not that we like to see that late at night, we'd like to see the 050 or the night departure used, which the airlines are doing pretty good. Like to see more of it.
Copy.
I have two quick questions, probably to Eric or Joe. Do either of you, I know you're not working NorCal, but maybe you have enough experience here. Is the Quiet Bridge legacy procedure used a lot? Not the FMS, but just the, the old VOR and DMD.
When the weather conditions allow for it, controllers are instructed to assign it to the extent that they can.
And so these would be airlines who didn't have access to the FMS bridge visual.
Yes. Yeah, we can still assign the quiet bridge as long as the weather supports it. But again,
Right.
one thing we have had is we have had some flight crews that have said, "Hey, I don't want to fly that. I'd like to go fly an ILS. I need a straight-in approach," and we let them do that also.
Is it true that the FMS bridge visual is helpful to the controllers rather than the quiet bridge, the legacy quiet bridge procedure? Because you can, tell them to slow up by a certain waypoint or otherwise control traffic easier.
My understanding is yes, it is something that is helpful to the controllers as well as the noise issues for the bay.
So it would be a plus if we could get more airlines to pick up on the FMS bridge visual.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
if we are being given a quiet bridge right now. Do you even happen to know on the legacy quiet bridge, as you know, it's a radial to the end of the runway. And it's not a straight in, not straight in. So that obviously the airplanes are making some kind of a course correction to line up with the runway at some point.
Yep.
Is there any direction given to them when to make that lineup or?
At that point, they are on their own to decide where and when they want to line up on an appropriate final approach course, and we let them do that.
Okay. And the other question was, with regard to airplanes that are not flying the Diamond,
Mhm.
the Dega, Pilot, Surfer, instead, is there any way, I know that both the FMS Yankee and, excuse me, the RNAV, RNP Yankee and the FMS and the, what's the other one?
Quiet Bridge and FMS Bridge.
No, the Quiet Bridge, the Legacy, have transitions from those two to the offsets. But there's no transition that I can see that allows those three non-diamond approach rivals to get over to the FMS bridge visual. There's no transition in the procedure, am I correct?
When I was looking at the flight tracks, I did not notice anybody from the south that was going to those offset procedures unless they were vectored out to the east to intercept it at that point. I can only talk to those specific flight tracks.
That sounds reasonable. So what I'm trying to figure out is if there's any way that on some kind of an informal or LOA basis with TRACON, we could have, you guys could design a procedure that would allow your controllers to feel comfortable giving a vector to one of those to intercept, say, the FMS bridge visual at a certain rate, a certain point or something else. I know it doesn't exist now and you probably don't do it as a procedure, but if we wanted you to take a look at doing that as a procedure, how would we go about doing that?
I would say have the roundtable put in a request to have that done. At that point too, if we do take a look at something like that, the controllers at NorCal TRACON are going to give a better idea of exactly how they would view that and how they would go about suggesting it. So we would basically run it by NorCal and say, what are your guys' thoughts on this and how would it work?
And of course, we're talking about in the dead of the night. I mean, we're not talking about when there's traffic there and you're not crossing traffic over each other, whatever, but just if there's a single airplane coming in, you know, from Cincinnati carrying Amazon packages, for example, you know, that we could get them over to the offset, no matter where they came from.
Yeah, I would say that needs to come through the roundtable and we would address it accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay, thank you for the presentation, and we're gonna continue with the discussion. Obviously, you're more than welcome to remain with us. So obviously, for us, what we're gonna decide to our next step, what we're gonna get staff authority to do, and Gene, can we get us started?
Yeah, I think so. There were a few things that were mentioned that I think it's worth following up on. One is, Bert, what did you mention about the current SOB or something like that with,
Right, so, periodically we meet with the tower and the TRACON so that we can convey any issues that might need to be changed. So usually we have some discussions ahead of time. And if it is agreed upon, it will make it into the 7110.65, which is the TRACON's SLP. There is a section on there, noise abatement. And it starts off with the heading, traffic permitting controller shall.
right,
And so they have, at that point, get educated and trained on that and they follow that.
okay. So one of the things we could do is a letter to San Francisco. And I guess the TRACON Tower maybe, but sounds like something San Francisco could, at the airport, could take to those discussions to see if they can improve their standard operating procedures with the tower. The other is, there was no hesitation from anybody to, you know, write a letter saying what it is we want. And I think what we're asking is pretty clear that, if not needed for safety purposes, remain on the stick until you're at the transition. Which is, and we could even put in there, not allowing, you know, shortcuts, you know, and how do you go about doing that? And then the other is putting everybody on an offset approach during the night on 28 right, you know, how do you get better adherence there? And I think, you know, I think Kathleen, you just brought up one of the ways to do that is get people from not on the diamond to actually be able to intercept those offset approaches. Because we'll also do some analysis on that. I was talking to Jason before this meeting, and that we haven't looked at who's not doing the offset approaches during the night, right? So who's not, and maybe we can learn why they're maybe not. Maybe they're on one of those other procedures that don't have that transition, you know, to go over there. So, I think those are the things that I've been thinking about, and I think we do have, I mean, I never heard, no, we couldn't do that, right? So I think we are at a place where people are open to trying to help us solve this problem, so let's, you know, let's put the things in front of them to help them do that.
Yeah, let's use the tools that they've given us as far as communication to try to open up the channels of figuring out how we can do that.
By the way, I'm assuming this is not unique to one airline. It's a violation or a process asking shortcuts from all the airlines that use that.
I would assume the same,
Is
but
that correct?
I'm assuming it's for those that are heading south. So,
And heading southeast.
and southeast,
That-
right,
that
thank you.
benefit-
More even so southeast, right,
Benefit from it.
right. So it's whoever is flying those flight paths, right? Because, and I forget who said it, okay, it may even been you, but we all understand they want to get to their destination as soon as possible. It's a win-win, right? Except for those communities underneath, so, it all
Well, as
makes
long as the
sense.
airport has room for them where they're going.
Right, true.
The,
So anyway, but it's trying to figure out a way to have that occur very infrequently.
Everybody likes to go to the head of the line if allowed. And that's kind of what it is.
from my perspective, I think you've laid it out very well. I don't see why we wouldn't write the letter, assuming we don't have any other questions or data that we need. If we have all the questions and data answered, then our conclusion is we'd like to request either a change in procedure or adherence to the current procedure. I think those are the two options, right? Kathleen, you talked about a new procedure being written or adherence to the current procedure?
Well, for the stick would be adherence to the current procedure for the offsets.
It's a transition to get them to the offset. So,
If I was playing the devil's advocate, though, the question I would have is, what is the quantifiable benefit of the shortcuts? How much are they actually saving in time and money?
For the airlines?
Yeah, I mean, by the way, regardless of what it is, I do think the public safety and the public nuisance factor overrides it, but it'd be interesting, is it really a savings or not, and to what extent?
I'd say it's a real saving. That's how much, it all depends on where they're actually going, how long their trip is. Longer the trip, the less the savings is for that trip maybe, but, there's definite savings, otherwise they wouldn't do it.
Money
Either in
saving.
time and money. Yeah, because time is also fuel. The
Yeah.
longer the aircraft is in flight, the more fuel it's used. So.
But, you know, the other thing to consider is that if you had, if you were gonna not give them a shortcut.
Yeah.
And they knew they had to fly to the port. If traffic permitted, and that's a big thing around here, there's traffic is all over the place and you can't really do it. But, a lot of airlines, a lot of airports or controllers running their traffic out of airports, will say, you know, reaching 10,000 feet, clear, direct with next phase. And that's a really simple thing to do. Pilots know that they are going to be able to
Once they
get
use the
shortcut
10,000,
as soon as they
right.
reach it. They don't need to accelerate it at 10,000 feet to 400 knots. They can maintain 250, climb right up sooner, and then get their shortcut. So it's not an either or. I think it's not a win-lose. I think you can find a way because we're talking about the middle of the night kind of thing. We're not talking about high noon, you know, departure time. So it's not necessarily either or. There's.
Right, they could still do shortcuts, is what she's saying, and just do them differently in a way that works better for us as well.
Yeah.
And one of the things Bert mentioned too is that even though if you're on the procedure, you're supposed to be out of below 10,000 feet at the transition port, is it called, at port? There are times And I bet those times are during the night that you're given unrestricted climb because there isn't other traffic in the area. So if you're on an unrestricted climb, you could do a shortcut, but you could also, you know, be up higher and, you know, that would help solve our problem as well.
And it's a matter of communication, so the
Right.
airlines train their pilots, they know, they expect that you will get, you know, you may get shortcut if you are reaching
Right.
here.
But then again, if you know your shortcut can be provided at 10,000 feet, but you're not getting there till port. You know,
Yeah.
you know the answer too, right? Because you can't do an unrestricted climb. You can only do a shortcut if you can also do an unrestricted climb, something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, Gene, I've got
Yeah.
a question for Eric real quick before I forget. Hey, Eric, so to what extent, so I remember I was controller back in the day for the Navy, and on the ATIS, when we were looking for, you know, we need balls on the PAR approach, and we put on the ATIS, you know, requesting PAR approaches for controller qualification or controller training. To what extent does an airport like SFO put, you know, offset approaches available, you know, or, you know, can they, and so I know that you can't basically steer the pilot's decision into like, hey, you know, expect this approach, you know, when, you know, checking in, but to what extent can you advertise that offset approaches are available between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. for noise mitigation, or preferred, or what? Is there any way to use the ADA to kind of help this process?
I don't have a good answer for you. I'm sorry. I was not a tower controller. I got radar down like nobody's business. My two kids are both controllers at towers now, and they could probably help that answer. But I don't have a good answer. But the one thing that I would hesitate to suggest is that we advertise approaches for procedures that a pilot's not qualified for. It's
Yeah,
just
right. That's what I mean.
from a safety standpoint, I would hesitate to do it for that reason.
Yeah, so like saying, you know, these approaches are available, not expect this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll be honest. My guess is that's not something that they have ever done. But I don't honestly know.
Okay.
Also, just for whatever it's worth, I was just looking at the altitudes over port between those hours, and it looks to me just a quick look. I'm not claiming anything, but it looks to me like they're about 12,000 feet, give or take. I've got some as high as 16,000 and some as low as 9. So, but that just kind of gives you a spread of what they're doing at port.
Okay, thank you. So I'll thank you, Gene, for your recognition. Kathleen, you want to add anything to this before I kind of jump in? And so I think one thing is very important, especially if we are addressing the approaches in 28, runway 28, is really to have that transition for the bodega, the pirate, to at least, you know, start having something there. And probably also want to kind of take a look, especially for this at night. And I think that probably lowered traffic than what we had with this stick, because you have Oakland getting interfering and all that kind of stuff. And on the approach, I think probably, I don't know, you have to correct me if I'm wrong. Less traffic, but perhaps we could do more focus on the sequencing as well, rather than having two simultaneous approaches or using both runways. But you have to provide a transition to the offset.
right. I think you're right.
Do we need to, I mean, obviously, staff, what do you need from us? Like, do you need to get more data? Do you need requests? We're gonna be sending letters to the FAA, right, and to SFO. But do you need anything from us, authorization, as far as you need more access to more data, more requests? Or shall we, I mean, my approach is to authorize you with any reasonable request that you have, unless my colleagues have any disagreement, whether from the SFO or FAA.
I think I'm fine going forth with talking to Joe and seeing what the possibilities are and have good open discussion there.
Yeah.
And then I can report back to you on what I find.
Yeah.
May not even need to go through the letters.
Well, the process for a letter, the Roundtable has to approve the letters, right?
Yes.
Can't come from the technical.
Yes,
working group
it has
without-
to be a-
right. So we'd have to get it on the agenda to do that, so.
That's,
I know who sets the agenda.
Really?
Right, but I just wanted to make sure the process,
Yeah.
we're all clear on the process to do that.
so are we talking about, for the letter, we want to do both of the procedures and both of the,
And, you know,
Yeah,
I think we want it to be clear to everyone,
and we're just talking about like opening a conversation.
Right.
yes, trying to figure out,
To see.
trying to
see
figure out
if
how
we
to
can
solve the
do
problem,
to-
right?
Yeah,
Right.
And I think that what we might have talked about was that our technical consultants are going to start looking at what might be a transition to plant a seed with the FAA on having a publicized transition from the other arrivals.
so basically, send the letters out, start the process that Bert can perhaps check with for us. And in the meantime, we follow up with the other issues we want to talk about, here is identifying the airlines.
Right, Jason will provide that with the month of data.
And,
that
and
we have.
maybe other stuff, so maybe the direction could be somewhat broad, for us. And it, you know, we can talk about that ahead
Right,
of the next meeting and
well, when do we have the next DWG schedule?
probably not till mid-February
Right,
because of the transition.
right,
And, there's still on January.
I'm still gone all of January, thank goodness.
yeah, so
I'm still
February,
going.
February until we can meet again, and I think that's the first that we would have. Unless you can do it by email or something, but the first we'd have drafts of letters to review.
I think that as far as I'm concerned, I would be, comfortable with giving this amount of direction from the TWG and bring it to the main group,
Okay,
without running it by us again,
yeah.
because we're not making any
good.
demands, we're making some polite asks and suggestions on
Yep.
things. So I would be perfectly comfortable giving staff the ability to draft that letter to bring back to the main body without coming back here for fine tuning. I think you guys are probably better at the fine tuning and language than we are.
Right,
That's a great approach, and that will come to the, in December meeting for
Correct.
the roundtable.
Vanessa.
I was thinking it might be February.
February, okay. I mean, you guys.
We don't have much work for December and
Yeah.
it's probably best to keep it that way.
Okay.
I mean, a wait of
Plus,
a little bit of time.
plus Bert said he's gonna have discussions and he can.
Right, and then we can
tell us what
report
he thinks
back
from
and see
that,
how they
so.
went.
You might want to get the letter in before Bert does it, it just gives it more cachet to the whole conversation, I think.
Well,
The
we can't-
initial,
Well, then we'd have to be December, right? Can we fit it in by then?
I think if it's a light letter, I think that we
Yeah, I
could
think
probably
it's-
fit it
we're
into
talking about
that.
A very general, generic letter.
Right,
We
asking
study these
people to
two
look at
issues
things.
And we want to open up a dialogue to see what we
Right,
can work on together.
Right.
Okay,
It's a letter of introduction, it's not.
Great. Well, before I open it to public comment, Joe and Eric, thank you so much. And Moifair, yeah, yeah. So go public comment first? Okay.
Just ask me for this.
I'm gonna thank them, but they're gonna sit around hopefully, but I just wanted, you know, after their presentation, after the discussion, thank you so much. Really, for being here, number one, number two, for being open and providing us with a path forward. I think those were helpful comments that you,
Yeah.
both of you made, so we appreciate that. With that, we're gonna go over to public comment for comments on items 1A to 1D on the agenda. And staff will note written comments which have been received and will allow members of the public to speak on items. No, I'm in the wrong place. No, that's correct. Okay. Excuse me. And members of the public who are present and have turned speaker slips will be heard first, followed by members of the public joining remotely. I'm gonna turn it over to Diane and to tell people who want to speak on how to do so. Item 1A to 1D.
Okay. I have not received any speaker slips currently,
Are you gonna?
and
Just
Okay.
Yes, please.
Oh, you have one more comment. Thank you. So Mr. Sri Hanose,
I'm sorry.
yes, you will have words.
Can I get that? I look
Yeah.
down.
Mhm.
Hi, my name is Srinivas. I am resident of Foster
Can
City.
you stand where the camera can get him?
Uh,
Actually,
Where's your camera
just sit there. and
It's right
sit.
there. Is it?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. Sure.
All right, I'm a resident of Foster City. I wanted to express my frustration over all of the flight noise that we get. We get several hundred flights per day. I'm trying to understand, thanks everybody here for spending time on this issue and trying to find a resolution for this. I have a question based on the information that I gathered from the presentation that FAA had. As I understand, the FMS bridge visual approach or the quiet offset approach requires a verbal request from the pilot and it is not automatically assigned by ATC. What I also know is about 90 to 95% of the aircrafts that originate in the east follow the offset procedure. And a similar number, 90 to 95% of the flights that originate from the south or west use the straight-in procedure. What I don't fully understand is there a special training that the pilots flying from the east get? With which they're able to request these offset procedures? Why are only the pilots flying from the east requesting these? If not, how do we explain this preferential approach based on the origin of the flights? I think a part of this was also covered with what Kathleen was mentioning earlier, but I wanted to gather more information on this. I can see the rest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I mean, I don't know, Joe or Eric, do you have any comments or answers or questions from the public?
I don't personally know if it is a specific training on an individual procedure or if it's simply training in the cockpit and that the pilot receives to fly any sort of FMS arrival. I believe it's not procedure specific, but all I know is that right now we don't know what the pilot's qualifications are. And because of that, we have to have the pilot verbally request it. I think as we move forward, I think you're going to find more and more pilots that are qualified for it. But as of right now, we just don't have that information in front of us. And that's the reason why we have to have the verbal request.
Perfect. Thank you.
Now, my understanding is that the pilots for the airlines have to be qualified. And not all airlines have the FMS bridge procedure. The Quiet Bridge and the RNAV GPS Yankee, that one, as long as you're RNAV capable and your aircraft's RNAV capable, you can do it. Nice thing about RNAV procedures is most every airline can do it.
But maybe not RMP.
RMP is a qualification, yeah. And a lot of airlines like to make sure that pilot, and particularly the foreign carriers, like to make sure they do special training for SFO.
Okay, thank you. Diane, anyone online?
There are currently no hands raised on Zoom at this time.
Okay, with that, we are gonna conclude. I wanna thank everyone for being with us. Our friends in the FAA, thank you again for joining us, and Bert Nang from SFO. Thank you, Gene Rondell. Kathleen, thank you so much, and all of you for being here. Diane, thank you. Ms. Lee, thank you very much. And for Dennis, thanks for joining us. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.